Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Wolfpack Season 1, Episode 6. So, there is some plus and minuses with this episode, obviously, but I feel like this is a thumbs up episode. I did thought it was good. There's some good story here, and there, of course, is some stuff that is just like, I really didn't like that often within this episode. I didn't like it that much, let's state. So, first off, I think the interactions that Garrett was having in this episode was actually really good. I was to also feel that there was some kind of milking out in the very early parts of the episode with the whole party thing. We also had when Malcolm was to have his tale to go into this private room to tell the wolf pack about this whole story. There were kind of these like really quick like visuals, which I'm like, okay, is that where they kind of ran out of money in the episode? Or I was to also just feel that I'm like, you know what, you should have gone and done like an all or nothing thing. If you couldn't have gone on and given me like a lot of visuals of what was going on in Malcolm's story, don't do it at all. Because that just seemed really cheap, and it just really was like, that was kind of to a dumb thing to just kind of do these kind of quick visuals that really didn't give me much of anything of the story. And so that was dumb, those kind of side images. I was to like the fact that we had like Cyrus is a much more key character in this episode, and we also had Kristen, who was to come to bargain with this werewolf. It also seems that we may possibly be getting more than one werewolf. That is to be the alpha werewolf, or maybe we could come to find that maybe the person who we thought was to be the werewolf here may be somebody different entirely. Uh, there could be just a lot of things up in the air with that. So, could just be giving us a fairly interesting story here. And so, we go on and have us find out why Blake does not have a phone in this episode. And I thought that story was really good, and quite a bit of the Blake stuff is kind of handled really well. And we also have like David Everett's father that has a pretty decent scene in here also for this episode. Um, yeah, I think other than that, I think that mostly goes on and covers most of what I thought about this episode, from what I remember. If there are to be anything else that kind of pops up, I will probably go on and reiterate things during the spoiler part, anyways. And so, with that said, I think it's about that time to just double fire this bad boy up, anyways. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this episode, whether you are to still feel like this show was crap, or were you to go on like, well, maybe like there is some potential here, where there was a lot of things that did go on and go south, but now considering this show is close to ending, they're gonna have to give us something good. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to double five this bad boy up, because I think it's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time to spoil this episode. So, we, at the very beginning of this, have the milking out of this party. So, we have our characters rush into the house to try to be protected by glass windows and doors. Yeah, that seems like the alpha werewolf won't get in because of those things. Oh no. So, we have our characters that tell us just how like stupid that they are technically, because they're just consistently like looking out of these glass doors trying to see if they can spot what this thing is. And we have one person who's like, well, yeah, I see it. It's right by the Buddha statue. And I'm just like, wait a minute, what? And then kind of when it kind of like the visuals are much more clear, you can kind of see in eyes and face, and you're like, oh, I found it. I found Where's Waldo. I found it. And so we have Everett that is to be talking to some kid that doesn't remember what his name is. And Everett's like, well, hey man, like you're high, like just kind of like cooler heads prevail, just kind of take some time, and like how many shrooms did you take? So we have a person is like, how high am I? It's like, well, you're not high enough, evidently. So, because they're still talking. So we have Everett that goes on to just kind of like, okay, like this guy's a little weird, and it doesn't seem all that familiar to me. So we have Cody that is tempted to just want to go on and leave. And so he is to go right into the glass door, and he just kind of looks around, but then he chickens out. We also come to find out that Cody won't leave so easily because they had arrived via a Uber. So unless he's going to get a ride from somebody, then he's not really going anywhere. So we have at one point where Everett is to want to tell everybody the tale of what is to actually be out there, as Austin is kind of begging Everett to like, well, tell him what it is. Tell him, like, it's kind of like the Twilight thing, the Twilight first movie, where uh, we have like Edward or whatever the vampire character is like, well, say it out loud. Goofy scene, but so because Twilight is honestly just goofy, and a lot of people will hate me for saying that, but I'm just being honest. There was a lot of just shirtless guys, and there wasn't enough of for me to care when the later and later the movies happened, because that's just being honest. So we have Everett that is to go on and tell the tale that this animal is to be the same animal that, of course, is to be out on that highway or that freeway or whatever. When they were to, of course, be on that bus, and we like have Austin's like, well, say what it is, and we have Everett that states that it is a bear. It's a black bear. And Austin's like, no, that's not what it is. And then he gets all upset, and he's like, I hope it all eats you and you all die. And then he rushes off to a other room because he's all pouty and upset because no one is to go on and state that it's a werewolf. So maybe it really is a black bear. We don't know. We rarely get to see it often enough. Yeah, we get to see it. We get to see it a lot better than we would normally on any other episode. But moving on. So we have, it seems that Everett is to notice that one of the people are missing after telling this tale of this black bear. And we, I think, have like the kind of the wolf pack group that kind of gets together, and they're like, well, hey, it's like it's a good thing that you didn't actually just tell everybody what it really was. And Everett's like, well, yeah, I just kind of wanted to like kind of leave that like between us, that of what it really is, and also not to freak everybody out. So Everett somewhat did a good thing here. But so we have Everett that is to go on and tell Harlan that like it seems that one of the people are missing. And so Harlan's like, well, I guess I need to go out there and try to find this guy who was to eventually be Baron, who is way too high, and he was to forget his name. And so Harlan's like, well, hey, that's not high, that's brain damage. So Harlan decides to go out there, and Cyrus is to like, well, hey, I'll go out there also. So some of the characters start to separate, and so we have Phoebe that meets up with Blake, and so Blake is like, well, why you hating? Why you hating on me, Blake? And so Phoebe is still upset of the fact that Blake had ghosted her with completely dropping her off her Fave 5 or her cell phone or her social medias or whatever. So Blake is to tell Phoebe that she doesn't hate her and she's sad that she's gonna freaking die in this episode because spoilers, that's what happens in this freaking episode. It's what kind of got me a little ticked. I didn't like the fact that Phoebe died in this episode, and she also gets kind of dragged over this piece of glass while Austin's like looking at her. It's like, oh, she's dead. She's getting dragged. Yeah, I really no, I really didn't like that at all. Because Phoebe was the comic relief of this show so far, and it seems that her character was much more interesting to see, like where she was gonna go with, like maybe forgiving Blake or becoming friends or whatever. But that never will seem to be a thing that'll happen now. But so, uh, Blake goes into this story about why she does no longer have a phone because she still likes Phoebe. So Blake goes on to state that she had been given a phone by her dad, Roberto, to unlock that, of course, was her mother's. And Blake did not want to go on and unlock this phone, even though she did know the password. So it seems that one way or another, Roberto is to come up with the password and is to get into the phone, and he comes to find out that his wife was having an affair with some other guy. And Blake even states the name, but I don't think I even was to like know it all that well. Maybe it was Rob, maybe it was not. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But so Blake is to go on and state because of a phone, her life was ruined for what we all know. And so that is the main reason why Blake doesn't go on and have a phone. And so Phoebe's like, oh, okay, all right, that makes sense. So Cyrus and Harlan are to go out into the woods, and we have Kristen, who is making a phone call, stating that she kind of waited and waited for this security guard to come with his key to get into this room, and he just never came, supposedly, is what she's rolling with. So we have Kristen and Garrett who are to go on to make it to the party, as we have like one of the people, it's like, well, hey, who called the cops? Because we're all high on shrooms. So we'll never know who really called the cops. Maybe it was Austin, because it's like, F everybody, I'm just going to call the cops. So we have Harlan and Cyrus that are outside, and they're making their way into the woods. They're trying to figure out if they can find where this guy is, Baron. So we have Harlan that is talking to Cyrus, and it seems that there's a possibility that one or the other of them could die, and so they're like, well, hey, let's kiss a little bit, let's do some kissing. And so I'm like, okay, like we have to have Harlan and Cyrus who goes on, and like we have to have almost a makeout sesh going on here. And all of a sudden we hear some like rustling and bustling, and so Harlan is to go on and tell like Cyrus here, like, well, hey, we should definitely go on and get back to the house because this thing is out here and it's big. So Cyrus to go on and kind of slowly but surely look back, and he's like, oh my god, that thing's huge. And Harlan's like, thanks, like I've been really working out. So we have this werewolf spotting, and so we then have Kristen, who's to kind of bring in her gun into the frame, and is to tell everybody, or is to tell Cyrus and Harlan, like, well, hey, get back inside. So Kristen is to fire off some shots, and those shots end up being warning shots that she even goes on and tells the world, like, well, hey, like, I'm on your side. Like, I'm just firing off some warning shots just to make it so that it seems like I'm doing something. But if anything, I'm wanting to team up with you. I want to do like a Brave and the Bold, like Marvel team up. Hey, let's join forces because I'm just as evil as I guess you are. As even we don't really know how really thoroughly evil Kristen is because we haven't read the book yet or whatever. The Tale of Kristen. So we have just like Kristen who's like just bringing like doggy treats and is like, well, hey, I'm on your side. And she's going on and talking to this werewolf, and she's like, I think that you can understand me, and because I know that you can. And she's like, well, I want to help you. And the werewolf goes on, and its voice is like, help me. And then it's like, oh, this thing can talk now? We're going to have talking werewolf? I don't know how I can just feel about that. Like, if we have, like, a Wolfman situation and the Wolfman, like, talks, like, I'm okay with that. But I'm not quite sure how I can go on and be fine about, like, a talking werewolf. Like, hopefully there's not much dialogue that this werewolf is gonna have at some point. This just seems very weird. Um, but so, anyways, we go on to have Garrett that makes his way into the party. And so we, of course, have Garrett who's like, well, hey, Luna, Harlan, like, let's get out of here. And so we have Officer Jason that's like, well, hey, like, I'm looking for Cyrus. Like, do you guys know where he is? Because we had him before, but I guess he's a slippery man of sorts. Just a slippery man. Like, we couldn't have gone on and really latched onto him, I guess, to really book him Dano like we probably are going to now, because he's the only real suspect in this whole entire case. So we have like Everett that's kind of whispering to like Garrett, kind of doing like a handoff, just like, hey, the thing is here. And Garrett's like, oh, good, because I brought my trusty gun anyways. Because at one point, Garrett is talking to Kristen, and while they're kind of driving to this party, I kind of have to pantomime here or whatever. And so we have Kristen that is to go on and be like, oh, like, well, I have a gun. It's like, well, it seems that you have a gun also. And Garrett's like, well, like, it's standard issue. It's part of the job. But Kristen's like, but yeah, but you have another gun. And he's like, well, like, that's personal. Like, what? Like, is Kristen just kind of feeling up Garrett or something? And like, hey, like, how many guns do you have, sir? Or maybe Kristen has just some, like, weird, bizarre sense of things. I don't know. Maybe that's a detective in her. Maybe she can, like, feel uh, like a gun being pressed into a seat. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But so we have Garrett that is to go out there and try to figure out if he can find where, of course, the werewolf is, because he wants to be kind of the Moby character to this whale that wants to hunt it down and kill it personally. So we have Harlan and we have Cyrus that make their way to Harlan's stable. And so we kind of have like a Ben Affleck Daredevil thing going on in this situation where we have Cyrus that is talking to Harlan, and he's to be like, well, yeah, like, I get it that I probably have motive because my dad had died, but it's like, but I barely know the guy. And Cyrus is to tell Harlan, it's like, yeah, I'm not an arsonist. And Harlan's like, see what? See what with my ear? My super hearing is gonna come to play here? And so Cyrus is like, yeah, I'm not an arsonist. And he's like, one more time for, like, we have to get that really good take of you stating this. And so Cyrus is like, I'm not an arsonist. And so Harlan's like, okay, like, because he ended up hearing Cyrus's heartbeat as he states that. And he's like, all right, he's telling me the truth. I'm a human lie detector now. And I'm assuming that's somehow going to come into play into further things. Which, it is what it is. So we have Harlan and we have Cyrus who are going to spend the night at the stable as they are to kind of almost spoon with one another, it seems. So, because the making out, I guess, is over. The honeymoon is over now. So, we go on to have Garrett, who is to try to want to go on and attack this werewolf. And so he is to boast about how he got on and he just winged the werewolf. And we find out later that Garrett is to know who the actual werewolf is because it transformed, I guess, with the bullet shot, just kind of weakened it. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. But again, that transformation just kind of sucked, if I hadn't stated that already. So we go on to have Kristen, who is to regroup with Garrett and Officer Jason, as we have Kristen, who is to kind of affirm that she's like, well, yeah, like I just went on and shot a couple times as warning shots because I didn't see where it is, or like she didn't really have much of an excuse. Which, if I were to have been Garrett, I'm like, it sounded kind of fishy. It's like she couldn't have gone on and just kind of hit this thing at all. What a crap shot or crap shot there. So either that or she's in cahoots with this thing, obviously. So we have Garrett that's like, yeah, I winged it. Yeah, I hit it. It was great. So we go on to have Kristen, who later on goes to Garrett's place, and while both Ranger Prisha and Garrett are kind of gunning up on these silver bullets, and so we have Kristen, who is going on and asking for Harlan, and is asking for like Cyrus and all that jazz. So of like, well, hey, where is Harlan? And because Kristen had seen Harlan with Cyrus, it was like, okay, where's your son? And Prisha ends up kind of giving an alibi for Luna and Harlan. It's like, well, yeah, like they came home last night. Harlan was to pass out in the bathroom. He was just so tired, and so like he went to bed, and like just kind of giving them all just kind of stories. So we have at one point where Kristen, Officer Jason, and Garrett are to go into the office, and we have Officer Jason's go, hey, like, where is Harlan? Because he's actually gone missing, as well as Cyrus is to have gone missing, and they also find out that like Phoebe is now missing because, of course, with in the party, after it seems that everything is to somewhat settle down, we had Everett that is to draw the conclusion somebody's going to end up dead tonight because there's always to be one death. And so we have to figure out what that is. So, after it seems that everybody's to leave the party, we have Phoebe that kind of puts a sheet or whatever, a bed sheet over Talia as she goes on, like, you're gonna wreck her, or some goofy thing like that that makes no sense to me. So Phoebe goes out into the pool to just kind of swim into the pool. Maybe somebody peed in it, maybe they didn't, who knows. But so Phoebe goes out there and she starts to be doing some laps, doing some swimming, and we come to find out that the werewolf is to go on and get a little nibble of Phoebe. So we all of a sudden next see Austin, who is just kind of in this room and is seeing just Phoebe just getting dragged by what we don't really know. But Phoebe is a bloody mess, and Austin is to see, like, okay, well, I guess she's dead. She's effed. So Austin again was hoping that probably everyone was going to die, but only one person really did. So, as I guess Austin was probably traumatized by that. So, we I'm trying to figure out where to transition here. So we Cyrus and Harlan. Let's get to that. So we have Harlan and Cyrus having this interaction and talking about as well as the rest of the Wolfpack being there to kind of hear Cyrus out about uh, him getting a blocked call. So he blocked his own phone. So Harlan is like, okay, like, why did you block your phone? And so it seems that Cyrus was getting these phone calls from this guy stating that he knew about his father and and blah, 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 and talking about the arsonist and this and that. So we come to find out that eventually Cyrus is to know that there is a firefighter that had been involved in the last fire and was to go on and have his own story. So the Wolfpack goes on to meet up with Malcolm. And so we have the characters that are to walk up to Malcolm and are to talk about, like, well, hey, like, it seems that we know that you've had some interactions with a wolf. Like, what kind of wolf was that? Was that a timber wolf? Was that a this wolf? Was that a that wolf? And so Malcolm's like, well, I don't really know what you're talking about. And so they're like, come on, like, we know that it was a werewolf. And he's like, okay, let's go into a secret room. So Malcolm ends up talking up about this story on how they were trying to get out of this one area within this forest, and there was like fire seemingly all around them, and so there was only one way out, and that was to, of course, be covered by this gray wolf. And so these characters realized that they needed to fight this gray wolf to get out of there, and so what ended up happening is we had these firefighters that all of a sudden had these guns with them, which is never really shown in how they had these. But so we have these firefighters that are going on and shooting up this wolf, which doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. And so they realized that they had to put like 40 to 60 rounds into this thing, and like it still just kept coming. We even had at one point where Cyrus's dad was to go on and put a bullet in between the eyes of this thing because he was so freaking close. So we come to find that they were to just toss this wolf into this fire, hoping that that will just take it out, but instead it just made it bizarrely stronger to the point of it being a legit, like, 7 foot werewolf like thing. And it's like, okay, like that just didn't work out to our real legit benefit. So we would come to find that Malcolm was to see his friends get slaughtered while he was kind of running away from this thing. And so lucky he was lucky to get out of there alive was to be the real like story of it all, just kind of rushing through that story, but still, because it didn't have the real legit visuals to sell me on it. So after we go on and are to have the pack go on and talk with Malcolm, we have Garrett who meets up with Cyrus. And, well, kind of Cyrus is kind of getting his stuff together. And so Garrett is to go on and ask. Cyrus is like, well, hey, like, are you the arsonist? And Cyrus is like, no. Garrett's like, well, I believe you. But I think there's some other people that need to go on and believe you also. So Garrett is to go on and take Cyrus to get booked. And so when Harland and the rest of the wolf pack make their way back to Garrett, we have Cyrus that is kind of very upset that, or Cyrus, we have Harlan that is very upset that Garrett was to have put Cyrus and arrested him. And Garrett's like, well, hey, like I believe that he didn't go on and do it, and I think that at some point when he goes into juvie or he goes up to certain people, like they will go on and believe him also. But so Harlan just gets more and more upset, and he starts to have yellow eyes as well as the rest of the other wolf pack, and their teeth starts to come out because again we only have the yellow eyes or the teeth that is to tell us that these characters are wolves. So they're going on and almost lunging at Garrett. We even had Harlan that punches out Garrett, and Garrett's like, "What the fuck?" Like I guess I'm gonna have to go on and just kind of whip out my gun and just pow pow pow, murder all these wolves. So we have Prisha that is to go on and bring out her own gun and like, well, I guess this is perfect time for them to know that I know that they're all werewolves and I'm completely fine with it. So we and you know what, like wouldn't it just be like the way that this story would go that both Prisha and Garrett just end up being a couple, because it just seems that like they're like really good friends or whatever, but like you might as well just kind of couple them up if like Prisha doesn't have anybody, or obviously Garrett doesn't have anybody because we would have seen that by now. But so we have Garrett that is realizing that Harlan is getting very aggressive, and so Garrett is like, "Well, hey, like Harlan, like remember who you are, remember." And we all of a sudden have Harlan that is to kind of back away, and then he is to become normal again, and so like all the rest of the world, so like, oh my god, like, or the rest of the pack are just like, oh my god, like how is it that like Garrett you knew to kind of pull us back as we were getting way too aggressive? And Garrett's like, well, there was this myth, there's this tale that if you go on and say the wolf by its given name, it'll back off. So that of course is whenever it's like, well, hey, like no wait, we have uh Garrett that is to state that when he was to shoot or wing that werewolf, that it transformed, and it was to show us that this werewolf is to actually be Baron and not some older guy. So we're drawing to some conclusions that maybe this could be Harland and Luna's brother, and maybe that there is another actual dad out there. We just kind of have to just kind of figure out that maybe also the Wolf Whisperer, the guy that's on the phone, maybe he is the actual dad. Who knows? There could be a lot of possibilities here. So we we have Everett that is to go on of like, well, yeah, like that was the guy at the party. That of course was to be uh, the guy that didn't remember his name, because when Garrett starts to describe the guy that he shot, Everett's like, well, yeah, that's the guy that I met at the party that only I saw. And so Everett is to state that this guy's name is Baron, or somehow he just realizes that. And Blake is to go on of like, well, yeah, how do you even know that? And Everett's like, I don't even know. We had also a scene between Blake and Everett, which I'm going to get to in a second here, but I'm going to try to wrap this whole up. So we have Garrett that's like, okay, I guess we're looking for this Baron guy. That's what we're kind of looking for now. So we had a scene where Everett was to go on and want to find Blake after this whole party was over, and there's also the thing that I have to get to with Everett and David, and we'll get there. So we have uh, Everett that goes on to meet up with Blake. And so Blake is telling Everett, it's like, well, hey, like, I want to go on and tell you why I don't have a phone now. But hey, if you want me to have a phone, like, I'll get one. And we have Everett that's like, no, 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 like, that's perfectly fine that you don't have a phone, because if always I can still find you anyways, as they kiss. And like we realize that these characters, like, it wasn't all about the high, like, no, they're legit gonna be together. And I'm like, okay, good. So it wasn't like a big mistake that they realized that they had made. No, they're actually gonna be together. And I'm like, good, because that is gonna be garbage if they pull that crap where it's like, the will they, won't they? Because it seems that these characters were kind of lusting after one another anyway, so it makes sense to just kind of tie them together. So that was a really good scene there. So to me, we go on and have Everett, who, once he finally comes home, we have David, who is to be like, well, hey, like how did your kickstand go, or whatever goofy slang thing that you guys are calling a party nowadays. And we have Everett's like, oh, that was a kickback. He's like, oh, okay, or whatever. I knew it was a keg stand or something, whatever. So we have David that is a state to Everett. It's like, well, hey man, I've been counting your pills and it seems like you haven't been taking them. And so Everett's like, well, yeah, maybe I don't even need them now. Maybe it's kind of like Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, where Tobey Maguire at some point in the movie is to no longer need the use of his glasses, because he is now uh, to be Spider-Man, and he doesn't need the use of that anymore. But then eventually, when we get to like Spider-Man 2, he puts on the glasses again because his powers are starting to weaken, and he realizes he no longer needs them at a certain point. But then when Mary Jane is going to take it, he's like, no, I need to be Spider-Man again. Moving on. So Everett is to realize that he no longer needs the medication, and David's like, well, yeah, but this blue pill, though. And I'm like, what is that, Viagra? Is Everett taking some whiffy stiffy pills? Like, is that what he's doing here? Hey, I don't blame him. Like, maybe he just wants to like feel that he can go at any time. I don't know, but so we have David that's like, well, yeah, like you should be taking this blue pill because maybe you'll be fine for a day, or maybe you'll be fine for even a week, but like you should probably go on and take this one blue pill, whatever it frickin' is. And so we have Everett that's like, okay, I'll take the medication. And so I'm kind of curious if all this medication could just be boiled down to all of it really being just a placebo, and maybe it's just some kind of way to control Everett all along. And maybe we'll find that Everett was hugely lied to about this medication and that he never had any of this stuff and whatever. Um, wouldn't that just be like a big twist to this story? To really find out how controlling Everett's parents really were, and maybe that's a big reason why Everett never really likes his parents. I don't know. There could just be a lot to just work with here, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But, anyways, so maybe there's a whole lot of conclusions a lot of people can draw from the part of Everett. But so we have Everett that's like, okay, I'll take the pill, and so he puts it in his mouth, but he doesn't go on and swallow it. He just spits it out in some sink, and then he kind of puts his hand out, and he's kind of looking at it. He's like, well, like it seems to be like surfboard. It seems to be fine. So yeah, so that kind of wraps up, I think, most of what is to be happening upon the show. We also had Everett that was to ask his dad. It's like, well, hey, you're not going to tell mom that I went out and I partied, right? And David's like, no, man, like it's perfectly fine. Like if I were honestly David, I would have just been like, no, hey, man, like I'm like as a dad, like I'd be like, hey, man, I'm fine that you actually freaking got out, that you actually did something, and and hey, man, I'm happy that you're freaking having a girlfriend too. Good, like seems that everything is just kind of working out for you right now. Everything seems to be aces, and like go out and have your fun. Like I think if I were a dad, like I would probably have to be the disciplined dad, but like I would also just be like, hey man, like I was young too, and whatever, and so it's like, hey man, like have fun, but not too much fun. I'd be that kind of dad. Just like, hey man, like, go on and just get in some trouble, but don't end up having somebody pregnant if you don't need. That's the way that I think like parents should always be, to always realize like, well, hey, I was once in your shoes too, and like go and have fun. Um, but again, not too much fun. So, with that said, I think that goes on to wrap up this episode. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this episode. If I already stated that, just whatever. I think I covered almost everything in my brain noggin. There was quite a bit of details where I kind of was like, I just want to rush to this part. Uh, Other than that, let me know if there's anything that I skipped around about. There might be a key thing that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, and then I'll bring it up in the following review. But I think other than that, I think I'm good. I think I'm fine. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.